Yes, let's go ahead and get started. So we can introduce some of our speakers right now, and then, as we cycle through, anyone that wants to speak, let us know and share your thoughts on the subject. But we're really going to be covering some of the facts about school choice. We have Kelly is going to be co-hosting and helping moderate everything, and then we've got Michelle Luft with ConservaTruth as well to give her insight, and Janis, my co-founder with Palmetto State Watch, and Kasey Grado, an awesome researching that lives in South Carolina. She's done a lot of great research into school choice, and we've got a lot of great things to share. So who would like to kick us off?
Ellie? Hi everyone. So I don't have, I'll get everyone started. So thank you everyone for coming. I think this can be a great discussion on school choice. School choice legislation has definitely become a popular thing amongst a lot of states. ConservaTruth and Michelle Luft, that's me. I write a lot of articles, as well as Meg Johnson, who's not on X. So we write a lot of articles against school choice. And I simply wanted to just really begin our points as to why we feel this type of legislation can be incredibly dangerous. So, and please, by all means, I would love a discussion on this so that hopefully we can educate everyone. We also have Kasey, who's well-versed as well. I don't know if, Kasey, you do want to start with some history to sort of start us off so we can focus and keep everything kind of flowing on a streamlined type of format. Let me know. What do you think, Kasey?
Yeah, I guess I can start a little bit. I'm Kasey, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a Blue State refugee, and I've landed here in South Carolina and have taught in New York City schools for over 20 years, both at the college and high school levels. So I really think the biggest elephant in the room for discussing why I personally oppose school choice legislation is because it's run by the government. There's nothing grassroots about this movement whatsoever. And essentially, we already have the federal government programming tools codified into our state law due to an indirect line of the government interfering within the state sovereignty of educational law. So school choice did not originate with grassroots movement. It came from the federal government. It was researched there. And if you are looking around at today's current events, I'm assuming if you're on this call, you're noticing this world is, or our country is kind of falling to pieces. And it really comes down through legislation. Now, in terms of school choice, the reason we even have school choice is because you must send your child to school. And you have different options on how you want to educate your school. It doesn't necessarily have to be a brick and mortar location, but essentially each state codified a law called compulsory education, which says, again, you need to send your child to school. So since the state is demanding that you must educate your child, they have to provide you an entitlement process for which you can educate your child, which is what we call the public schools. So the public schools are funded by the state. They also get funding by the federal government, and there's a few other ways you can get the funding within the school district. But essentially, school choice is your ability to choose whether or not you want to accept your entitlement from the government and receive your free and public education, or it is your choice to turn down that entitlement. Now, where we are today, proponents of school choice are arguing that, well, the government has infiltrated the public schools, and we don't want our children to be taught diversity, equity, and inclusion for whatever the reasons might be. And we don't want to have our children not be able to strongly identify as recognizing themselves as a male or a female, so we're confusing them. So parents end on top of the fact that the schools are just failing the students. They're lowering academic standards year after year, and parents want a choice to be able to pull their kids from the entitlement. However, not everybody is able to afford an alternative school or feel that they have the ability or the capacity to self-educate their child through homeschooling. So the argument here is, well, how can we justify that our public schools are failing our students and not offer an opportunity for those students to get out of those systems, again, that are entitlement systems? So the school choice venture, again, researched and designed by, you can find a whole bunch of research papers on the ed.gov website, which is essentially the US Department of Education. They classify that there's 14 different types of school choice programming that you can pick from. So some of them are education savings accounts. Some of them are homeschooling options. You could also have school vouchers. You can have tax credit education savings accounts, tax credit scholarships, individual tax credits and deductions, charter schools or other types of school choice, magnet schools, intra-district public school choice. I've mentioned homeschooling, online learning, customized learning, town tuitioning, microschooling, hybrid homeschooling, and I think I pretty much named them all. Now, currently, South Carolina did implement one of these types of school choice, researched and designed by the Fed, in the tax credit scholarship category, which is called the Educational Credit for Exceptional Needs Children's Fund. And this was enacted in 2023, and it started in 2014. And it is currently being overseen by Exceptional SC, which is a whole nother conversation to have. But at this point in the game, June last year, the General Assembly codified what they're referring to as an ESA, but it's labeled in law as the ESTF, which is the Education Scholarship Trust Fund. And what they're looking to do is they're looking to take taxpayer money to create scholarships for students who fall under a certain category of another entitlement. So it's not open to the entire general public. And they want to have the schools, independent schools, and a whole bunch of different varieties of your current choice options for schooling to accept the money in order for you to facilitate, for whatever reason you want to pull your kid out of the public school for, another opportunity. Give yourself a choice. But with that, Arizona, right now there's 33 states with school choice as some form legislatively enacted by state law. But they are in.
Did we lose her?
Kasey, we can't hear you.
I think we lost her.
Uh-oh.
Oh. Kasey?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we can hear you. You rubber band
Okay.
out for a second, so sorry.
You know what it is? My phone blacked out, so I wasn't watching that, so that might have been an issue.
No worries. Continue.
I don't know where you lost me.
A couple of sentences ago.
Okay, so the state wants to create, or has already created, this trust fund to give a limited amount of entitled students a scholarship to attend a school of choice at this point in time. And as I was mentioning, Arizona was the first state to get this up and running, and they are now, Arizona's legislature is trying to hold the independent sector receiving the vouchers accountable to the same public standards of the public schools. So that is really where the trap comes into place, because once the state is acknowledging to the public that tax dollars are being used to fund schooling options, the public will demand that there's some set of accountability held onto those schools. Currently, state regulation states that the independent sector, religious sector, private sector, it is optional for them to be accredited. However, these school choice, at least in the case for Exceptional SC, you have to have a membership in good standing in order to maintain your funding supply. So what does that come into place? Well, then that comes into accreditation. I'm not here to discuss the accreditation per se for this particular topic, but the federal government cannot insert its ideologies and frameworks into the public state schools unless under two conditions. One, you accept their grant money, which means you're going to take in what they're calling a free program into your school, but there's stipulations on what needs to be done in order for you to accept that money, and that's where some standards could come into play. The other way is your accreditor. Now, when you trace back the accreditors system pretty much falls right back down to the federal government on some level or another. Usually at this point in South Carolina, the tie-in piece is Cognia. And even if you just go to Cognia's website, you're going to see all their diversity, equity, and inclusion standards that they're trying to play out. So essentially, I would say if you trust the government, then school choice is a good idea. But the problem is that we're all trying to escape these public schools because of the government's interference, because they've taken in a ton of grant money, because they have these accreditation requirements coming down from the very top of the pyramid. And at this point in the game, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be said in terms of the money. Now, I know, Michelle, I'm going to let you jump in at this point, and then I'll come back from there.
Thank you, Kasey. Yeah, I'm just really going to lay out, as Meg has laid out, 1, 2, 3, 4 points why school choice legislation can be quite dangerous in taking away educational freedom. So one of the points is that in some shape or form, any financial benefit provided is going to be regulated, right? So if it's not regulated the first time, it will be regulated the next time, and so on and so on. As we all know, we have a lot of laws, and school choice is the one that passed last session, which was S39, created a solid, yet another solid framework to add even more laws expanding on school choice. For example, this session, H 5164 was a bill that was attempting to expand school choice. And with that added some language involving homeschoolers to receive money for education, to use, the voucher money for private schools or homeschooling activities. The next thing that we should really be concerned about is that, what about privacy, right? All this legislation regarding school choice involves a lot of data collection via the eligible forms or the schools in themselves. So we're collecting a lot of data to be used later on, especially for the homeschoolers. And I do want to advocate for the homeschooling community, that right now it's incredibly difficult to gather information regarding homeschoolers in South Carolina. I'm not talking about other states, right? Because our homeschooling laws here are, pretty good. But once you start opening it up, school vouchers to homeschoolers, then they're going to start gathering data. They're going to start gathering data as to how you educate your children, what are you doing to your children. And if you are a homeschooler, as you know, many homeschoolers have different styles of homeschooling their children, and the government may not agree with that style. So that may be a target for those families who want to have the freedom to homeschool their children the way they see fit. So in theory, I'm really advocating, because I honestly think the homeschooling approach is really our last approach when it comes to education freedom. Educational freedom and school choice are not the same thing. Educational freedom is defined as the education that you decide as a parent to educate your child. Now, of course, you have compulsory laws that limit when we educate our child, and we certainly should advocate to repeal that, which probably would not happen, but that is something that we should really start talking about more, as to why that took away education freedom in its entirety. So really, I just want to make it that simple, that no matter what type of benefit, any benefit you get that the government provides, it's public funds, it's coming from the taxpayers. So that's another issue too, is that school choice legislation, if you look at the amount of money estimated to cost, it's just tremendous, right? And who's going to bear the burden of that cost? It's going to be the taxpayers, and certainly not everyone using those vouchers. It's going to be a lot of families who are working hard who will not decide to take the vouchers, or who don't have kids that are eligible. So that's another problem with school choice legislation. Now, a lot of advocates for school choice say that, well, we got to do something, right? We got to pull our children out. So at least we're doing something. But again, we're not really doing anything, because the laws, the educational laws, if the government is providing a voucher, the educational laws follow that voucher, right? So the eligible school accepting that money will also have to follow those regulations. And even if it's not in the beginning, it will happen in future legislation sessions. So I'm gonna stop there, because I could continue on. And I don't know who's gonna speak next, Kelly. I don't know.
Elena?
I don't have anything else at this moment. Janice, do you have anything?
Well, I was going to add, as far as the cost is concerned, another thing that whenever you start flooding dollars into a program like this, it's going to drive up the cost for those already in this market. And so that's another concern. I mean, private schools, they cost a certain amount of money right now, depending on the area you're in. You start adding government money, and guess what? The cost to attend private school is going to go up. Same for homeschool materials, etc. That cost is going to go up. So, I mean, we've seen it in healthcare, where, government funds, government funded healthcare, public healthcare, and the cost is going up. I mean, it's not really going up, but it's kind of the sticker price is, even though you can negotiate it down. But still, I mean, I don't know. It's just, there are lots of different angles that we could take on this. And what we hope to do over this evening and then the next several weeks is actually to kind of pick apart some of the different aspects of school choice. And we'd love to hear from everybody here as well, and really just engage in a dialogue about this and what's going on in South Carolina, and where you think we ought to be going.
Well, at that, if you don't have anything more to add, we can open it up to discussion. What we're going to do is, if you look on your phone, you see
Kelly,
a
I'd
little.
like to add something
Oh,
first.
sure. Go ahead. Let's go. Okay, go ahead and finish, and then I'll do that. Go ahead.
Sure. So, the concern comes back to, now the state's going to have a say in the private sector. So first, let's just discuss what the problem is with the state currently. The U.S. Department of Education, and you could find this information in the U.S. Department of Education's organizational chart, they have broken into 3 separate entities. One of those entities is the Institute of Educational Sciences, otherwise known as the IES. From the IES, they broke into 4 more entities. And one of those entities is called the National Center for Education Evaluation and Regional Assistance. Under that category, that breaks into a few more organizations or divisions, and one of them is called the Regional Educational Laboratory. Currently, our deputy superintendent, who is the chief academic officer, is on the governing board of that U.S. Department of Education division. That division has been responsible for giving out grants to states, of which then the states exchange data for the money. And then the division had taken that data and formulated different studies, of which then they've taken the results from those studies to go back and lobby legislators to pass legislative laws that would codify federal programming tools into state education laws. Currently, we have several federal codified programming tools in our state. When the school choice options expand to allow more money to flood the private sector, The standards that we have right now, I mean, I could speak as far as Anderson 1 goes. They're following the plan from the federal government, which is what we're saying we want to pull our kids out from being exposed from, because they have decided back about 20 years ago, utilizing 9/11 as a catalyst, that academic standards don't necessarily matter the most. So we're going to start judging your child based on character traits. So in 2001, South Carolina followed legislative direction, and they codified character development laws, which now, if we fast forward to the Every Student Succeeds Act from around 2015, the regional educational laboratories revamped their study endeavors and really started to kick social emotional learning into high gear. Flash forward now to come back to touch base. When the COVID bailout monies came, the state was flooded with trillions of federal dollars. The independent sector did get a portion of that money. And the way that money was held accountable was to implement something called Class Wallet. Class Wallet is the platform that is being called for to be utilized to navigate the money from the state through this platform to then deal it out to wherever you're choosing to use your educational voucher at. Class Wallet comes back down to the federal government. So this is also a way to entrap parents to actually having all of their finances being caught and captured by blockchain. So there's a little bit more involved with this. I mean, the cost for Class Wallet would be, I believe the Impact Financial Report stated that it was going to be a $90 fee for each student. So by the time this program reaches the 185,000 students, this is going to cost state taxpayers billions of dollars each year, in addition to funding the failing public schools. Now, with that money is not being used in the public schools, and people are pulling their kids out of the public schools, and they're going to want to place them in independent schools. So now you're going to lose your cost per pupil that's funding all the individual school districts. So it's actually going to start defunding the public school system. Ultimately, if you look at this and you look at UNESCO's and standards and what the CDC wants to do with the whole school, whole community, whole child program, they want to encapsulate the entire school market because they want to provide all these services to your child via the cost of saying that it's educational. So we're going to lose teachers, are going to lose their jobs. Because, part of the impact, the financial impact statement had even mentioned, well, depending on how a school district decides to cut their cost, that's going to predict the way that the district will survive. So, there's so much more. This is pretty much Betsy DeVos's baby has no interest in public education, and they want to defund the public education. So this is not just, hey, we want to give our kids a choice. There are people who want their kids in the government-run schools, which by all means, that's their choice. They're entitled to it. They want their kid there, then let them stay. But now you're going to start stripping those districts of well-needed money. In addition to, now our taxes are just going to keep going up. I mean, I know my school district just increased the.
Do we lose her again?
I think so.
Kasey! I think our phone continues to black out on her.
It does. Well, I reset the timing that was suggested, but so I mean, this is much more than the argument that's being shown here. I mean, the proponents of school choice are just pushing, yes, positive aspects. Look, our schools are failing our kids. And what doesn't even make sense with this one is that they're acknowledging the public schools are failing our kids. And yet we want the public schools to still run the fund that's going to then infiltrate the private sector. Like, well, if our schools are failing our kids, why are we giving them control of handling money to put into another sector to do what? To do the same thing? And why aren't we actually advocating for our schools or our state legislators to pull out the codified federal programming tools that they put in that are clearly still failing our students. I mean, I think the stat is we're 42 in the country. Number 42 was the worst. But, you know, there's a lot of things tied into this because there's a lot of federal funding coming back into our education system. So it really comes down to is, will we bite the hand that feeds us? I mean, do we want our state sovereignty? So, you know, when they do break down the U.S. Department of Education and defund it, it won't matter because we've already codified the federal program tools into our state law. So now that the federal programs are codified into state law, once the demands of putting in the state standards, we're going to force the federal government standards into our private schools. Where is the logic in that? So I just find it very surprising that nobody's talking about the after effects. Everybody's like, oh, this is a solution to our failing schools. But yeah, well, what problems are going to come out of this solution that wasn't discussed thoroughly? So I'll stop there for now.
Michelle, do you have anything else or?
No, I think I think it's time, we should open it up for questions.
Wonderful. So what we're going to do is if everyone would look at your, on your phone, you have a little heart. And on the heart, on the far right, there's a hand, like it goes up like this. So if you'll raise your hand, we'll call on you and you can speak and just, we can have a nice discussion, robust, ask questions, all that. So if anyone has any and would like to speak, you can request by hitting on your far left corner of your phone. You can request to speak and I can bring you up. So anyone would like to speak, raise your hand. Should I play Jeopardy music? I have no takers.
Hey, I'll take a shot. This is Jeff Davis.
Sure, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think most of y'all know that we're big school choice people. We've been fighting this fight here in the state of South Carolina, and I know we haven't ever sat down and spoken about it. But what is your solution? And the only solution cannot be take all your kids out of public schools and homeschool them. I mean, there are a lot of families, what do you do with autistic kids, dyslexic kids that need specialized training? Does anybody here, I see Jim Lee on the call. Jim Lee's running for school board in Dorchester County. Should he not run for the school board because, the public schools are a lost cause and we should step away from them? Should we oppose anything related to public schools? Because, to me, I'm a supporter of all education, public schools, private schools, Christian schools, and homeschooling, but you're sitting here saying you oppose school choice. And I agree, there's a lot of dangers in anything that's out there. But the only solution can't be, throw it all in the garbage can and everybody needs to homeschool your child. And if you do believe that, the problem is the mandatory requirement to provide an education or for kids to be enrolled in education, why don't y'all just, pursue that? Try to get a bill passed that says, we don't have to have mandatory education anymore for K through 12. So, I get confused why, the issue to me is whether it's government run or non-government run. And if it's government run, there's a problem. And we are going to get school choice. Private schools and Christian schools are not going to go away. And, people want to help those schools and they want to help those families. So we are going to get school choice in the state of South Carolina. We're going to get school choice in every state in the nation. We may even get federal school choice, as it's been promised by Tim Scott and Donald Trump and things like that. So why would we oppose something that's going to happen? And if we know it's going to happen, because homeschooling is not the only solution for people, why are we not fighting the government-run school choice? And because that's where the battle is. Everything that y'all made an issue or concern about in regards to private school choice, there's a solution. There's a solution for tuition inflation. There's a solution for over government regulation. There's a solution for all of those things, and they're proven, for the past 30 plus years. So I just wanted to find out why are we only advocating for private school? Homeschooling, and not the public schools and the private schools and Christian schools.
Ladies, would one of you like to take that?
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I know your educational credits for exceptional needs children's fund is funding autistic children to go to other places, and it is tied to accreditation. But what's interesting is,
can you let us know who's speaking?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Kasey, Jeff.
Okay, hey, Kasey.
What's interesting is one of the accreditors listed as being a creditor in good standing, the South Carolina Association of Christian Schools, clearly states the following on their website. So it says the voluntary accreditation of Christian schools is a means whereby the South Carolina Association of Christian Schools can assist member schools in building of stronger Christian schools. Accreditation is voluntary. It is not an attempt to license or regulate. The voluntary accreditation of Christian schools is never viewed as a governmental accrediting program. Well, the issue that I have with this is that they are tied to the American Association of Christian Schools, who then have a connection to the other means of which Cognia comes into play, of which is the federal government. Now, in terms of helping special needs kids, actually, when you pull your kid out of the public school, you actually forfeit a whole bunch of rights that are protected to them when issued with the federal legislation. Most of these schools can't support students like this. And just because you get an accreditation from one of those people listed on that bill, that doesn't guarantee that they're giving you a good program. It's actually a disservice to special needs students because they're actually going to not get the life skills that they could have gotten had they attended the public school. Now, in terms of saying that we're just talking about how it's going to affect the private schools, yeah, it's going to affect the private schools. If the reason for school choice argument is our public schools are failing, so let's open the door of the independent sector to be infiltrated by the same government standards that are failing the public schools. Why aren't we advocating to get the government out of the public schools? The federal government, as I've mentioned to you before, only can have a say in the public school system if you invite them in. Why isn't there an actual valid, instead of trying to taint the whole system? I mean, actually, this school choice effort is a national effort. And to say that it's going to happen is actually saying, hey, everybody else is jumping off the bridge, so let's just jump off the bridge and hope that we're going to land in a boat. Why aren't we addressing the issues that are actually causing people to have to escape the government-run schools? You know, we're really just trying to the national, the government's research and designed school choice endeavor here is actually a practice of equity, and it's equity of outcome. Because the argument is, and that's actually the whole Marxist ideology here, equity of outcome is we're only allowed to end up in the same place. We're not supposed to have anything different. So it's not fair that we're going to encapsulate our entire public school system. We need to capture the private school system too. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can do it if we can get money involved. Because if the money is taken in, they've got to abide by our standards. So therefore, we can push our programming into the independent sector and the homeschooling sector and the online tutoring sector. And now everybody is assured equity of outcome. So I understand your point, Jeff. But in the same breath, like instead of saying, hey, you know, I hear this a lot in South Carolina, give me your solution. All right, well, let's analyze the problem. Well, we don't need to analyze the problem. We're just going to give a solution. What's your solution? But the problem is each solution that's put on legislatively is only covering up this big oozing gaping wound with a Band-Aid. And it's festering. Nobody can see it. Oh, look, it looks great right now. Until that wound gets big enough and infected enough that it needs another Band-Aid, which comes back to more legislation. This legislation is choking us. School choice is you take your free entitlement. Here's the public school. You want it? Take it. You don't want it? You have a choice not to take it. Now they've transformed the definition of school choice. Hey, your choice is we're going to let you take this entitlement and put it in any school that you want. Well, then that's not a choice anymore. That's the encapsulation of all choices that exist. This school choice effort is actually mislabeled like every other leftist bill, just to fool people, because this school choice bill should actually be called the elimination of school choice.
So what is your solution? I mean, and there's a whole bunch of incorrect statements you made in there. What you first started off talking about accreditation. Where is
Jeff?
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
I was like, where did you go?
Sorry about
that.
But
No problem.
accreditation, where in the school choice bills is accreditation required?
Okay, so in the exceptional SC, the PACE bill, it's tied to accreditation and good membership in good standing.
Right.
If you look at all the accreditors listed on the bill, membership in good standing turns into accreditation. It's like a trial. You know, you go to the gym, you want to see if you like this, you try it out. If you don't like it, you can't come and use our resources. Well, that's the membership in good standing. You could come in, you could try our things, but after a limited amount of time, as described by the individual accreditors listed in 126370, I believe is the tax code. If you don't keep to keep a membership in good standing, you actually have to take on the accreditation itself. Now, how does that tie into this school choice, the ESTF? Well, currently right now, from the bill that was passed in June 2023, exceptional needs students couldn't apply for the money. But in the last bill that just went through, it was going to allow them to double dip into this fund as well. So they could claim their $11,000 from the scholarship from the exceptional needs, from the exceptional SC fund. And then they could also get a voucher coming from here because they fit that criteria. So now if you open the door that those students could jump in on this fund, here's your accreditation piece tied in. Now, it's also very new in the game. They just tried to amend 8 out of 13 clauses from the original law passed in June of 2023, before a year even happened, before the program even got up and running with kids in private schools using these vouchers. You know, the problem with legislation, and including the exceptional needs as bill, is it comes in under one guise, and then in each consecutive legislative cycle or for a span of years after, they keep transforming it. They amend it here, they amend it there. I mean, the PACE bill actually wants to do a repeal and replace right now. And I'm grateful it hasn't passed yet. At what point?
Can you give me some examples of where this has happened in other states?
Sure, Arizona, I can send you a link privately because I'm not going to lose. I'm very new to X and I've tried experimenting. I end up losing connection here. But Arizona is actually having their legislator say, hey, well, we're going to hold them to the same standards. This is the accreditation piece. This is, the cheese to the mouse bait was, hey, look, it's free money. And then once you step on the trap, you're trapped into everything else. In addition to, once they get these things, some of them are entitled to these things for the rest of their life.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Has that passed in Arizona? Is that the fact? Has it passed?
I don't know if it's passed yet. I didn't follow through with it, but we got 33 states. You got Tennessee screaming. You got Texas screaming. There are actual groups in multiple states, if you open up and look around, that are saying how detrimental these school choice bills actually were. They're getting tied into.
Let me clarify for you. Arizona, that bill, what you're talking about, has not passed. Arizona just got a universal ESA, which is 100% government run, which I think we all on here should oppose. Now, Adam Morgan and the Freedom Caucus have been pushing it because they got some financial interest involved in it.
Oh, they absolutely do.
Yes, and we both agree on that. But what you're talking about in Arizona has not passed, number one. Number two, Arizona has had their programs involved, which have been tax credit scholarship programs, just like PACE, that are run by independent nonprofits for about 25, maybe almost 30 years. It's been going on in Arizona for 30 years. So you have I don't know, it could be 50, it could be 100. I know Pennsylvania's got several hundred independent nonprofits that are fighting exactly what you're complaining about. They are fighting it, and that's why it has not passed in Arizona. Now, if everything is done by 100% government-run program like the ESAs, which we all should be opposing.
Can you clarify if your S is savings or scholarship? Because ESAs could be an education savings account or an education scholarship account. Can you clarify what you're referring to here?
Education savings accounts are for college. Those are things that people donate money into. They may get a tax credit, they may or may not.
Right. And we have that here in South Carolina already.
It's called Future Scholars. It's run by the Treasurer's Office. Scholarship accounts, which used to also be called education savings accounts. They keep changing the names, as you know.
By design.
By design to confuse people. Those are 100% government money from the state of South Carolina or whatever state has it. We're calling it the Education Scholarship Trust Account because it's been found unconstitutional not once but twice by the South Carolina State Supreme Court. It's been found unconstitutional in the federal courts by a case out of Charleston that went to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Virginia and was found unconstitutional. So they've rewritten the law and they're calling it Education Scholarship Trust Accounts, which are now before the South Carolina Supreme Court for the third time. Ellen Weaver and the South Carolina Freedom Caucus and every rhino out there is pushing this.
Correct. And some of her affiliates from other nonprofits are on the governing board of the regional educational laboratories. So yeah, it's a big corrupted system for sure. Con men are well imprinted into the state.
We certainly agree with that. But what I have given you is the solution. The solution is the pay scholarship bill, any tax credit scholarship bill that is 100% run by independent nonprofits. Because those independent nonprofits, whether there's one or three, like they're in Florida, or if you've got 25 or 30 or 40 in Georgia, or if you got several hundred like you have in Pennsylvania, they're all run by conservatives that sit there and are administering the program and sit there and fight back on government overreach. I don't know if anybody else is on this call that's ever administered one of these tax credit scholarship programs or a school choice program. I have. I've administered 2 of them. And certainly in the one in Georgia, we had no issues or problems because the government was not trying to overreach. But here in the state of South Carolina, they did try to overreach. And guess what? Because we were an independent nonprofit and I wasn't a government employee, we told every one of our schools, guess what? You do not have to give demographic information on your children. Well, guess who called me up and actually called my wife up and yelled at her and hung up on her about it. And while we have been harassed and beaten up by the government for the past almost 10 years now, is because we told the schools, and it was Melanie Barton. Melanie Barton was the head of the Education Oversight Committee, which was supposed to bring us, has been around for about 30 years, was supposed to bring us better schools in the state of South Carolina and needs to be disbanded and gotten rid of. But she works for the governor and she's the education czar for the governor. So, I mean, if you do not have independent nonprofits, if you're not running an independent nonprofit or some other conservatives are not running one in the school choice program, nobody is going to fight back. If it's 100% government run and you're a government employee, you're going to say, guess what? My boss told me I got to collect demographic information on your school, and the school's not going to know any better. You need.
Jeff,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is Exceptional XC considered an independent nonprofit, the one who's overseeing the educational credits for exceptional needs children's fund?
The short answer is no. The question I would ask you is who appoints the board? The governor appoints one. The finance chair appoints 2 of Senate, and the House Ways and Means Committee chairman appoints 2. It's the worst rated program in the nation because it's 100% run.
Right, and it's also run by a board who makes sure that the accreditors come right back to their actual other nonprofits they're involved in.
The board chairman for Exceptional SC is the chairman for your South Carolina Association of Christian Schools. It's a problem. It needs to be replaced.
And SCISA's on there too, right?
There was a recommended person from SCISA, but he passed away. He died. So there's only 4 members on there. But Randy Page, who works with Adam Morgan in the Freedom Caucus, he's on there. He's a board member. It is the worst rated program in the nation.
Right. So SCACS, the South Carolina Association of Christian Schools, is a runoff from the American Association of Christian Schools, who has held national legislative conventions, who hosted Betsy DeVos. Who's trying to defund the schools. Yes. So currently, are you currently, and please correct me if I'm wrong, are you currently saying you are not happy with the way that the educational credits for exceptional needs children's fund is being run as of today?
I'm not only currently saying it, we've been saying it since the government took it over in 2016, and we've been in active litigation at various times with them over that time period. Yes.
So if a PACE bill passes, this will be the fourth modification to the initial law that was enacted in 2014.
This will take it back to the original law, is what it will do. Why the law was changed is because the independent nonprofits were pushing back against the government, and the government here in South Carolina, they didn't get away with anything they want to do. What they did is took over the program, and they've slandered the heck out of anybody that opposes what they're doing, and we've continued to fight. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. But I mean, just to tell you, it's not a rechanging of it. It is going back to the original status of what exceptional, let's say, or the educational credit for exceptional needs children was about. Now it's expanded. We've added more children. You can make it universal. You can make it backpack. You can do anything you want with a tax credit scholarship as you can do with what they market from an education saving or scholarship account. But it takes it back to the original thing. It gets the government out of the program.
Well, I don't understand how it gets the government out of the program, because isn't it still tied to accreditation membership?
No.
In good standing?
You have to be a member. There is no accreditation requirement of the tax credit, the educational, exceptional SC, PACE. There's no accreditation required in the education scholarship accounts that they've got. There's no accredit. You keep saying that. Well, no,
I know. And you keep saying a membership in good standing. But what I'm telling you is after 3 years, you can't keep a membership in good standing. You actually have to become accredited by the organization. So the membership in good standing. Oh, it is. Look it up. They tell you right on their own website.
Please provide that. I've asked you to provide it and you can't provide it. I'm telling you, the law says you have to be a member in good standing, and there's no accreditation requirement.
So give me a moment, because I'm going to pull up. So SCGOP's, the South Carolina Independent School Association, is one of the accreditors listed on the bill. And
one of the organizations you have to be a member of. They also accredit schools.
Yes. So SCGOP's levels of membership. Level 1, member candidate. A school may hold this level for a maximum of 3 years. They have to, I'm sorry, this is SCGOP's, not SCGOP. This is the South Carolina Association of Christian Schools.
There's you can about 7 or 8 of these member organizations. You'll have to show that in every single one of them that you have to become accredited. You do not have to be accredited of all of those organizations.
Well, it starts with a membership, a member in good standing, and then it eventually turns into it. But here's how they get around it. Because if they're also accredited, Cognia wants to be added. It doesn't go back to the original bill, because Cognia is being added to the list. And Cognia is actually,
Kasey, Cognia changed its name. The original bill had Cognia in its original name. It's changed its name like twice since 2013.
Right. Well, SCGOP is using Cognia and using the American Associations of Christian Schools' entire test banking to keep their.
I'm not a supporter of SCGOP's and Edward Earwood over there. But there's other organizations you can be members of that you do not have to become accredited. I've been telling you this.
Right, because SCGOP and SCGOP's are tied into Title 59.
It is not tied into this bill that you have to be an accredited private school.
We'll continue to have this conversation. I'm going to reach back out to you. The last time I asked to sit down with you, you told me if you spoke to anybody about me, they would think I was the enemy. So. I'd like to come in and we can schedule a meeting to discuss this.
If you will bring me requirements from each of the each of the member organizations that say you have to be accredited, and if all 8 or 10 of them, require accreditation after a period of time, I will revisit the discussion with you. But you keep telling people it requires accreditation. It is not true.
Right. It's a membership in good standing, and the membership in good standing turns into accreditation.
Not at every organization, it does not. There's about 8.
Which one doesn't it turn into accreditation?
There's a Montessori thing, but
Montessori who has their pronouns listed on their board members' sites.
And who cares? As I've told you, you got to have an.
Well, that's why people are escaping the public schools. They don't want the propaganda.
You have to be somebody has to say that a school is a private school. We've had this.
By the way, SCGOP is connected to the Montessori system as well.
Yeah, there's some.
But all right, so we're going to bring this back to other people talking, because this should be more of a private conversation. And I hope the next time I reach out to you, you'll accept an invitation to a meeting.
Bring the information that shows accreditation at every organization. I've told you, and you keep telling people that it requires accreditation. It does
Bring
not.
me the information that states
Now
that
you
it
want me to
doesn't
bring
turn
it. I'm
into.
like,
Well, you're asking me to say that it doesn't require that, and you're saying these schools don't require it, but they do. So show me where it shows that the membership in good standing doesn't turn into an accreditation.
I've shown you the law that says you just have to be a member. You
In
say
good
something's
standing.
going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen because I've never, ever seen it happen. Never, ever have I seen it happen. Since I've been involved in this stuff since 2008. I've never seen it happen.
Your solution is to put a Band-Aid on the public school problem instead of addressing the public school problem.
How do you want to address the public school problem?
Let's get the federal government programs out of our codified laws.
So
why are we doing what?
Where's your bill to extract that language from the law?
Exactly. Why is everybody rushing to expand the government's reach into the choice independent sector that exists today instead of pulling back the government's influence in the public schools that are forcing our kids to be subjected to a global citizenry agenda propaganda?
Kasey, I have a solution. I have legislation, and I've presented it, and it solves a problem that I see and currently will help children. You're expressing a problem, but you won't file legislation to fix it. Write the bill and get somebody to file it. I will support the bill. Write it, but you have to do something.
Thank you for your time, Jeff. Your solution does not seem to be something that I think would be cohesive in the long run for the benefit of any American citizen.
And Kasey, thank you for saying that. But what is your experience? You've already fled from 2 different states, New York and New Jersey.
So let's talk about that.
So
I don't know if these people, I don't know if the people on this call are actually interested in this conversation. However, as a brief nutshell, I left New York City because I got pushed out with overdevelopment and policy and legislation reform that it took over my state that actually made people insane. So I jumped into the next state of New Jersey, of which COVID completely exasperated that system. Being in the education system, actually as a New York City teacher, I was one of the pilot cities of all these programming endeavors, and not necessarily the school choice here, but of the federal programming and the character development and the social emotional learning. And flash forward to June of 2020, those were the cities, most of those cities who took on those programmings were the ones that burnt their cities down. Now, why did I flee? My husband worked for the federal government. I worked for the state of New York, and they gave us medical mandates. We did not want that, so we left. And now I come here trying to keep my nose free of the education system because I understand that it's doomed. But God put me exactly where I am, and I'm watching the pattern lay out for the 3rd time. So when you say I left and I flee, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's insane things going on that legislatively caused to happen. So we have a whole bunch of legislators making laws that are actually going to make things worse, that it's going to get to a point, if we could flash forward in time, if you believed in time travel, that many people are going to try to flee from. And any place that anybody wants to flee the insanity, especially in the public schools, because, James Lindsay says it best. The Marxist plan was to encapsulate educational theory. Once they had educational theory, they can encapsulate the colleges of education. Once they've captured the colleges of education, they capture the teachers. Once the teachers are captured, they capture the students. Once the students are captured, they capture the future. So what you're doing here with these school choice bills, and not you per se, Jeff, but any of these school choice bills, it's allowing the government to capture the last remaining standing choice of not having your child indoctrinated by government standards.
Yes.
The federal government researched and designed all of these school choice options. If you're a believer in the government and you believe the government has your best interest in mind, by all means, support school choice. The problem here for me is I don't think I trust them anymore. I've been burnt way too many times to trust them. Why would we put them in our private sector of schools when they can't be trusted with their own programming? The national legislators, the national lobbyist organizations are all working cohesively in unison for a reason. There is a thing called controlled opposition. From my perspective, it seems that this is a controlled operation. And I do not believe everybody who is promoting this is aware of the fact that they're actually doing the devil's work. So
And
to answer your question, I didn't flee my states. And for you who are not South Carolina native yourself, it's pretty hypocritical of you to say that I left my states to come here when you did the same exact thing. Jeff, I will be reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Elena or Kelly, if you want to take back control, because Jeff is trying to make this, he's gaslighting me essentially, because that's a tactic the left uses.
What I'm trying to do, Elena, in case, what I'm trying to do is point out, yes, there is controlled opposition, and controlled opposition that opposes the only school choice that will fight back against the government is the problem. And you're opposing the PACE scholarship bill, real school choice, that is administered by independent nonprofits. And guess what we got? We got the education scholarship trust accounts. We got Ellen Weaver and Adam Morgan profiting off of the system, and that's what they're pushing. Why are they pushing it? Why are you aiding them? We need a
I'm not aiding them. We don't need any school choice. That's what I'm saying. School choice, no matter what of the 14 types of school choice the government designed, is a trap. All of it, including yours.
Yes,
so I am not in support of PACE. Again, this is more becoming of a personal thing. There are people on the line who don't necessarily want to hear this, although if they do, I will engage a little bit further with you. But I think being fair and courteous and respectful of people's personal time on a Sunday night, I will reach out to you and I will stop in your office and we can discuss this a little bit further.
Yes, but you realize I am from South Carolina. My family's been here for several hundred years. But school choice and controlled opposition.
Except for you ran a program in Georgia, so
you are the controlled opposition. That you're talking about things that may happen. We're talking about what has happened. You came here, you opposed PACE, and guess.
Go ahead, Elena.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we're getting a little off topic here, and now we're kind of going into things that this discussion was not supposed to be, and we ask that everyone please remain respectful instead of yelling into the mic. So I know we've had multiple people that have been wanting to speak, so I'm going to go ahead. I know Michelle and Janis both had their hand up, and Jim Lee as well wanted to speak. Janis, I think I saw your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and add?
Well, I was just going to talk briefly about Cognia because that is mentioned in the PACE bill, and but I don't know that we need to go into that right now. I personally would like to let some other people speak. So if Jim Lee wanted to go, or anyone else that's in the queue, I don't need to talk.
Jim, would you like to add?
Sure. I joined a couple minutes late, and I just want to make sure I understand what is the intent of this forum here this evening. One thing that's resonated with me is something that I've been saying for years as well. You know, we keep trying to find solutions to anything other than the problem. And what is the root cause of our problem? Our schools are failing. And you can trace it back to well beyond 1978 when the federal schools were created, and it goes back beyond that. But here we are, and as someone who is running for a school board, having to deal with the reality of this is where we are. And, you know, I believe that every single parent has school choice today. Now, how viable that option really is, given all the government entanglements and all the different schools and accreditations and memberships and all the other nonsense requirements, whether real or believed. And I believe that there are a lot of them that are believed that are in fact not in law. But because of the bully pulpit, you know, they're being browbeaten into complying and providing data and doing all sorts of things they shouldn't have to. But as someone who is running for a school board that has got its share of challenges of its own and having to deal with the reality of the situation where we are today, the school system that I'm interested in serving is underfunded, not because we don't pay enough in taxes, but because the government, the legislators, the legislative delegation, the county council have done such a poor job in managing growth that all of this is falling back on the school system to try and figure out and solve. So all that to say, I'm not quite sure exactly what the focus of tonight's conversation was, but as for me personally, what I'm interested in hearing is any insights that people can provide. One, I've already heard here is that the legislators don't even know what they're legislating, and that most people outside of this group of people here that are obviously very interested probably don't understand 1/10 of anything y'all are talking about. So how do you deal with that as somebody running for a school board?
Anyone would like to answer that? Michelle or Kasey, Jan?
Yeah, I mean, I will take it. So I think the focus of discussion is really to highlight and make aware of the school choice legislation that's coming across each state, right? It's just a nonstop agenda going on, and speaking for myself, the dangers of it. Now, Jeff had asked the question about the solutions. I think the solutions, unfortunately, are hard for people to hear, right? We always want to think, well, the government needs to fix it. That's what we're always running back to. We need to legislate this, we need to legislate that. But the solution, and one being, is that it's necessary to promote action for the parents to keep their children out of public school, right? And assuming the responsibility for the total scope of this action, and careful oversight of any use of outside public or private resources themselves. Another solution is funding for public school. I know Jim Lee was discussing that it's underfunded in his district, which may be the case, right? It's not a balanced funding. But overall, the funding for education is up to what, $4 billion in South Carolina? So that has to be severely curtailed. That's another solution. And of course, compulsory attendance laws are an issue. Now, of course, to change all that, we need legislation. But here's the problem with legislation. Once you introduce a legislation, whether it be the best legislation you could possibly come up with, it could be the shining star without, nothing. It will get worse as it goes down the sausage making factory. It will. And if it doesn't get bad in that session, it will get worse the next session. And then just education laws in South Carolina, Title 59, are South Carolina's largest title code. All we keep doing every legislative session is adding more and more laws. Are we going to be around defending these laws? The homeschooling community, why I advocate for the homeschooling community, because the homeschooling community back in the days, and I'm speaking with a wonderful lady, Meg Johnson, she was at the forefront advocating for homeschooling. And now everything that she advocated for is turning around, where now we're saying, oh, we need to give money to homeschoolers, right? And here's another issue that I don't think we're really considering. The more money we give to people, the more dependent we make them. And when we make people dependent on government money, we make them irresponsible. There is some sort of beauty with responsibility. It is expensive to educate your child, because it needs to be expensive, because that's your most valuable. It's not for me, it's just my valuable child. I will do whatever I need to do to make sure my child gets the best of everything. And it comes with sacrifice and responsibility. So
What?
the solutions are really, really hard for people to hear, because it makes them uncomfortable that they have to sacrifice. And it is hard. Listen, I am a product of growing up in one of the worst neighborhoods in this state. But my mother sacrificed a lot to put me in good schools without government money. And so it is not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. And I also feel we should encourage churches to step up more and create educational communities to provide to those who can't afford. So there are a lot of good solutions. It's just that they're hard. And we have to stop pivoting all the time to, let's create another law. Let's create another legislation. Let's create, and we're just growing and growing the police power of every state. So I'm sorry, Jim. That's pretty much the focus of this discussion, is just school choice and the dangers of school choice legislation, as well as how it is taking away from public schools, which I'm not I'm only advocating for school choice. I'm a homeschooler. So
Michelle,
there's that.
Okay.
if I could, and
Can I?
not defensive at all. The reason I say they're underfunded is because we are trying to do too much through our schools, and because the schools weren't properly funded in the first place, we have huge amounts of deferred maintenance and other logistical problems that have been created. That said, what you said about starving the beast, basically, we need to bring the funding down. When you look at the relationship between results and spending, anybody that's actually lived or worked in the private sector would tell you the schools are an abject failure. And if we focus on results, the conversation needs to change, because all we keep talking about are new and novel ways to spend money and grow programs that continue to produce no tangible results.
Sarita, I see that you were trying to speak. Did you want to add something?
Yes. So I'm a 18-year veteran homeschool teacher, homeschool mom, and I also have 3 years public school experience teaching. And I'm also newly elected to the South Carolina State Legislature as of the primary in June. And a lot of people in my district are very, school choice was a very important issue for them. And so I did not run necessarily on school choice. I didn't run necessarily against school choice. What I ran on is accountability and transparency, and what we're not getting from the government or our school system, which is also the government, is any accountability and any transparency whatsoever in how money is being allocated and spent. Period. That's the end. That's the end all be all of everything. You can have an underfunded district who allocates their money well, really advocates for their children, and they do well. They may not have as much money as some of the richer districts, school districts in our state. So I think we need to be advocating for whoever your legislator is to make sure that the funding that you are getting is used in the best possible way. Why do we need 6 superintendents who make, I don't even know what they make in different districts, but we don't necessarily need a superintendent and an assistant superintendent and then a vice superintendent. It's just not well funded. I pulled my kids out of school because I saw socio-emotional learning in the 90s when I was in teaching school. And so that's why I never put my kids in public school, but that was a personal reason. So, as a future legislator, I would be interested in hearing what you all have to say. I've never run for office before. I've never been in office before. That's why I'm on here, is to learn what you all have to say, because the people of my district want school choice. So I need to know how to advocate for that, but advocate for it in a way that doesn't raise taxes. We don't need any more taxes. We don't need any more money. We need money to be well spent, period. In every sector. I'm not just talking about education, but in every sector, none of it's being well spent. And we don't have any visibility, and we don't have any accountability. We don't have any transparency. We're supposed to have a zero-based budget. That is our state law. And not one, well, I'm not saying not one. There are several legislators who are advocating for the budget to be legal. Governor McMaster's not doing that. Nobody seems to go in and care, whether it's the Department of Education or the Department of Health, they're not going in with their zero-based budget. How did you spend your money, and why do you need an increase? That's how it's supposed to be by law, and that's not what we're doing. So we don't. And I want to correct. I can't remember who said it. The government doesn't give you money. That was my money to begin with. They stole that money from me via taxes, and then pretend like they're giving me a gift, trying to give it back to me. No. That's my money. You forced me to give it, and now you want to give it back to me? I mean, that's the most insane thing. I mean, so we got to be sure that we're educating people and telling them the way we're doing it is wrong. The system is broken. The Department of Education is a broken system. And when it's broken, if it can't be fixed, it has to be started from scratch. But transparency and accountability and the way money is spent, Mr. Lee, you're running for school board, that needs to be what you're running on. Yeah, we're underfunded, but let's see if we're spending the money the best way we possibly can. And that may be the only power that you have if you win your election, Mr. Lee. And I guess I hope you do. I don't know much about your school districts, but I think that's where we are, and we need to be careful that we're framing things the right way with being accountable and transparent. Does that make sense?
I'd like to jump in on this because, we're talking about why everything keeps going up. Part of this that I had mentioned is that the state legislator keeps codifying more federal program tools into Title 59. And some of them, I'll talk about First Steps, that's the state's, was introduced in 2014. That's their preschooling programming. It started up with partial grants that the state accepted from the U.S. Department of Education. And then eventually the grants were necessary to get the exchange of data, of which then the department created studies and convinced the legislators with their lobbyist firms to say, hey, you really need this program in your state. So once it gets lobbied into law and codified into law, the Fed doesn't need to be given their assistance, their financial assistance for that program anymore. And now the state taxpayer picks it up. So part of the reason our numbers are going up is because we keep codifying federal laws that some started on grants, and now we've got the financial burden to keep paying for the federal program that we disagree with in our schools. The other thing is we got flooded with 3 rounds of COVID bailout money. The schools, it was broken into lots of different categories, and one of them was what everybody keeps referring to, the ESSER money. And ESSER is ESSER, stands for Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund. And with that, we were given demands of which we needed to hold accountability that the money was being done and used correctly. And part of what the government is now trying to do is, you'll notice there's this big push for mental health services. They're blaming social media that the mental health crisis is on its way, but really it's the schools who are enabling the mental health crisis. But because we have a mental health crisis, we need mental health counselors in our schools. So some of the school districts took the money and hired these mental health services and school counselors. I know my district actually hired a lifeguard with the money that they wanted to maintain. And then when the 3rd round just ran out, in their last budget, they lost $5 million of their budget because they no longer had the Fed's funds, but then they increased their budget by $7 million. And you could imagine that $5 million was to keep the services that the federal government gave them free money for to get in the door. But now it's the states that district's responsibility to keep it on, which comes back to the taxpayer. So, the other thing is the equity is a huge push here. It's a redistribution of wealth. Each time one of these programs is legislated, like First Steps, it went and it uses the minority population or those who are families that are struggling to justify codifying a new law into place, which means now we have to support that system and now we need money for it. So again, the fees go up because now we have to support what the federal government got in our door under free money. So that's part of the issue here. And we have administrators who are strictly, or people who have roles that are strictly handling the money coming from the federal government. You got someone in charge of Title I, you got someone in charge of the USDA's grant on the free school lunching, which, by the way, that grant's going to run out. So once we get everybody on free lunch, now we're dependent on the free lunch. At some point, they're going to pull that grant, and guess what? It's going to fall right back on the taxpayer. So really, you want to talk about something legislatively, start undoing the codified federal programming tools that we put into our state schools, of which we know aren't even helping our kids because we're still failing them. Our state superintendent just asked for $10 million to reduce the current state standards by 35%. So there's something wrong here. Why are we funding funding the federal government's ideas of what we should be doing as a sovereign state. So again, I agree, the U.S. Department of Education needs to go, but as I mentioned before, it won't matter if they defund that because we've already got all their federal programming tools up and actively running at the taxpayers' responsibility to dumb down our students and make them all good global citizens at our own tax-paying dollars.
Wow, Kasey. I don't even brought that one home. We have a hand up, and I see Kai. Kai, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. So one thing I would like to bring to light is we need to look at who are we actually paying in the school systems. And it's the administrators. For real, they get paid a bit too much. They get paid, I think it's, not sure about the exact numbers, but they get paid year round, while the teachers who work under them only get paid for the days they're in school, and it's counted as a full year job. We need to pay our teachers a lot more than they are, because if we support our teachers, then we will actually be supporting our students. They're the frontline workers. If you want to talk about how we can improve our school system, why are we talking to the administrators? Why are we talking to the politicians? They don't know what goes on in the school halls every day. It's our teachers. We need to talk to them, and we need to hear what they're saying. They don't want us to keep on throwing in programs, to keep on just changing how things are going each year to try and get the next grant. They want us to figure out a system that they can stick with, that they can get used to. And with all of y'all saying school choice, well, the ones who are getting let down by allowing school choice, by encouraging school choice, is the public schools. We are literally defunding them the less people who go there. And I'm going to get a little bit hate for saying this, but I don't think that we should be allowing so many charter schools. They aren't as helpful as they really could be. They claim to take off the strain off of the taxpayer by having people pay for their own schooling, right? But that only makes it a split. That makes a split between the people who can afford it and the people who can't. Right? And the people who can't are just getting downtrodden. That's all I got to say. I'm willing to discuss this more if y'all have questions.
Ladies, anyone want to take that? Kasey, Jan, Michelle?
I will if nobody else wants to.
Go for it, girl.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on point. They're defunding the public schools. They're literally going to take taxpayer dollars to fund a school choice endeavor that could be used, first of all, to fund the public schools a little bit more. And second of all, they are going to drive down enrollment because they want to expand these vouchers for everybody. And when enrollment goes down, they won't need as many teachers and counselors and administrators. So in the long run, they're actually, the goal is to replace the human teacher. I mean, the state legislature has been active in trying to raise the teacher's pay. I'll give it that much. But in the case of my school district, they're giving a teacher raise every single year in addition to their step. So what profession gets a raise every year? Because as much as I want to pay the teacher, and by the way, I am a teacher, we need to make a living, but why isn't everybody else in the world then getting a raise? And the reason they're giving them a raise is because they're indoctrinating them with PLCs to get them on par to take on the social emotional learning and push the agenda. So they need to kind of bribe them to keep them in there. And that's their method of maintaining compliancy and keeping willful teachers. I mean, the PLC program, the professional learning communities, is actually taking away individual teacher autonomy. In terms of the charter schools are public schools, but they really have little to no oversight. The Freedom Caucus, I know, went after Lexington 1 maybe about 2 years ago at this point in time because they had taken in a social emotional learning program tool called Education. And from what I understand, that lawsuit settled, But lo and behold, here in Malden, we have a charter school that uses L-education as their mission statement. So we're funding the school that the Freedom Caucus went after in terms of getting out because of the propaganda that came out with that particular program, which, by the way, is a CASEL social emotional learning tool. But yet we're funding a charter school. I mean, we're actually have schools out there with endeavors to raise social justice warriors right underneath our nose, and it's being funded with public money. I don't know if that addresses everything that you said, Kai, but that's what I can recall from what you had said.
Go ahead, Kai.
Okay, so one of the things I would like to have a discussion on is y'all say school choice is important, or well, not school choice, but you say you keep on referring to the fact about what's actually being taught, right? You're saying that they're being taught to be social justice warriors as if it's a bad thing. Could you explain that a little more to me?
That is going to take a much longer conversation than what I think the intent of this is. I wouldn't mind contacting or having a conversation with you outside this group to go on a little bit more. If you want to be led in a certain direction, I would tell you James Lindsay does an excellent job actually talking about the Marxification of our education system. From your profile picture, you seem to be a little bit on the younger side than myself, although I don't know if that's a picture of you or not. But part of the plan was to encapsulate the colleges of education. I mean, I know from my formal training from attending a CUNY school in New York City, when I had to take one of my teacher's exams, it was the biggest joke going because they would give you a scenario of something happening in the classroom, and they had wanted the most idealistic situation to be the correct, appropriate response. So, you know, Mary and Jane are having a conflict in the classroom about a particular topic. What should you do, A, B, C, or D? And, you know, the choice that they wanted was for you to sit down and have a kumbaya moment with them. But that wasn't happening because Mary and Jane were actually from the Bloods and the Crips. So, you know, the ideology and the theory, the educational theory that they've trained teachers with these days actually haven't given them any of the skills to handle any factual things. And now they're going to use these professional learning communities to still try to maintain idealistic situations while drafting fictionary scenarios just to get their point across that they want diversity, equity, and inclusion taught. And when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not necessarily the definitions of what we thought once was DEI. I mean, it's the same thing with school choice. School choice started that your choice is to take the entitlement or you don't. Now it's your choice is, well, you don't like the entitlement we're offering you, so we have to offer you more of an entitlement. Well, then that's not a choice. You're taking what they're offering, and here it is because we're saying you have to do it, or you don't. That's the choice. And now the definition has transformed using their vocabulary to suit the needs of getting the state and the federal government into taking control of the private sector, essentially.
Anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay, so if we're gonna we're done with hand, I'm happy to we can do a popcorn session if you people want to speak and ask some more questions. We can I ask that everyone be respectful to one another so we can have a conversation. Anyone want to add anything to it or have any more questions? Anyone? Bueller? Jan, you haven't spoken. I think you have a lot to add. Why don't you add some things?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of listening. I mean, I think that there are so many things that have been brought up, and what's the solution? Those are the types of things that I like to think about a lot. And I do think that the fact that a lot of the solutions that the legislators come up with are band-aids is they're not even really addressing the real problem is spot on. I, my biggest thing is, I think with all these programs and funding and everything, it's taking away from what the teachers are actually doing. It's making it more complicated than it needs to be. My mom taught in the New York school system back in I guess she retired in the late 90s. And so she got out because she didn't like all of the, I don't know, the requirements that they had to, what they were doing with teaching. And I think it's just gotten worse since then. And I think it's hard for teachers to be autonomous because their hands are tied so much. And so, Kai, I feel you. Teachers aren't really able to teach. They've got to teach the test and all this now with all the putting everything online. There are actually, if you look at Cognia, they're really interesting because if you trace their money back, that's an entirely different conversation. But if you trace the money back, they go back to the federal government. If you look at their standards, they update them every couple of years. And the standards, if you read them, you'll see that they are getting away from actual educational standards and more into uh, political, social type standards for the schools, pushing towards more technology in the classroom, pushing away from standards. I know that the school district I'm in, which is Aiken County, I think they were in trouble by Cognia. They lost their accreditation or something. They fell short. So then Cognia came in and had a package for them to use, to purchase, to come back into good standing. And so as part of those, they have all these acronyms. One of them is, what's it called? SAMR. It's like substitution, augmentation, modification, reimagination. Basically, if you look up that acronym, it's moving, it's getting them comfortable with having technology in the classroom, and then basically moving them away from even doing things like writing. So all their tests would be online. It moves it toward a dialogic model as opposed to actual learning. Um, I'm kind of all over the place, guys. I'm sorry, but I just think that the direction that is the schools are being led, because there's really no choice in accreditation in South Carolina. It is Cognia. I would say most of the private schools that are, at least the ones that are in SCISA, they're all Cognia accredited. They all are moving toward technology, and whether we like it or not, it's taking away from the teacher's autonomy in the classroom, and it's taking away from the standards. It's lowering the standards. Another great source that I always like to refer to is Charlotte Iserbit. She was in Ronald Reagan's Department of Education, and she wrote this giant book. It's called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. You could see that progress through the century leading up to where we're at now, but even more so now with the adding in of the technology. It's taking away, it's deducting from the standards. Like I was starting to say about Aiken schools, they are no longer requiring students learn their math facts by rote. So it's just a continual erosion of those standards. And I think that that's a major problem with this federal funding, because that's where it's going. So if we don't do something to curb the federal reach into any type of school, we're going to be in big trouble.
And Jan, I'm going to add something to it. And I've really kind of kept my opinions to myself tonight as a co-host. And you guys, this is your wheelhouse. You guys, I'm more the medical person, but something that really stands out in my mind is in education. My mother was a teacher too for 50 years. So I grew up in a household with a mother who was an elementary school teacher. She had her master's in math and in reading, and also became a reading recovery teacher at one point. And, she did have to buck the system quite a bit when things start, when dealing with her students. Every student learns differently. And so she addressed each student's ability to learn in the way the student needed to. And I remember having those conversations with her. I remember her frustration. And I still remember, and this is something that sticks out in my mind, is that we have to teach, and this is a commonism, but we got to teach kids how to think, not what to think. And I feel like that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with that. This is what you have to think. And when you have government making standards, or even funding that is tied to standards or government, then you're a lot of times having to conform to those. So am I stating that right? Got a thumbs up from Jan. Anyone else would like to add to it? Some other things? Anything?
Well, I mean, this is Jeff Davis again. The only thing that I would add, and I got on the call because it was listed as a school choice call, and I don't think there's anybody that knows more about school choice in the state of South Carolina or just generally than what we do. And then as soon as we get on the call, it's like we want the calls about opposing school choice. There are solutions and problems that are out there. And my suggestion is that we all sit down and we have a roundtable or have a discussion and get down to how we can fix public schools, the private school choice programs, homeschool. There's a lot of things that we can do. But quite frankly, I think a lot of us are being manipulated into fighting each other while we're sitting there having a debate about whether we should have school choice or not have school choice. Guess what? The legislature is passing school choice, and they're giving us a 100% government-run program, which I think if we all talked about it, we would obviously all oppose, because I actively oppose it. So, I mean, my suggestion with some of y'all, especially, Michelle and Kasey, and, I guess you guys, with Palmetto State Watch, let's sit down and have the discussion and talk about it. And if at the end of the day, you think it's better to oppose all school choice, or you think it's better to, that we have a government-run school choice program, which, the Freedom Caucus folks have been pushing, Adam Morgan and those guys, and Kasey and I at least agree on that there is some corruption there that needs to be exposed. And I think it's why he lost his congressional race. But let's sit down and talk about it, because I think I am more than willing to 100% change direction if what we're doing is wrong. But I mean, I've been working in this or dealing with this since 2008, when a tax attorney that worked for me came and asked if I would sponsor one of these nonprofit organizations to help children in private schools. And I've obviously researched it, listened to the court cases, it's probably a lot of things that a lot of people don't know, that if you actually knew what was going on, you'd be like, oh my God, we got to, y'all got to come to kind of our perspective and view on it. And, right now, I mean, I will tell you, because of this debate that goes on, we lost $55 million for children this school year. I mean, there's 10,000 kids that aren't going to get, admitted into, an education or help, special needs, low income, homeschool, all that type of stuff. We just lost out because we're dickering and talking at cross purposes versus sitting down. But I'm more than willing to sit down with you guys at any point in time, and let's have that discussion, and let's bring in a legislator. Let Sarita or Jim Lee, these people that are actually, I think I see another school board member on this call. Let's bring in some public school people. Let them, let's see what we can do to fix the situation and all be talking in unison, because our real opposition is the legislators and what they're, the people that are pushing more government on all of us. We all agree that, we want the government out of our lives, and we don't want, strings becoming attached to any type of school choice or money going to homeschoolers or private schoolers. And there's ways to do that. But, my goal is I want to see, tenfold, more people going to homeschooling. I want to see more, private small schools starting up. And guess what? If I can offer a scholarship through an independent nonprofit to a small autistic school that wants to start down in Hilton Head that needs $11,000 a year and can get 20 kids to sign up, I know people that'll start a school doing that. And otherwise, those kids are sitting in public school not getting serviced. And I think there's things we can do if we all meet and talk together. So I would propose that that's something that would be a positive that would come out of this call.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff. It would be good to sit down and talk. I guess I think what part of the biggest problem is, and this is, I mean, it's just America in general. Anytime we have any semblance of choice, when you actually get down to it, it's not choice. You go to the grocery store and there are 50 different brands of yogurt, but then when you actually do the research, you realize that they're all made by the same, couple companies, and they're all, they've all got bad ingredients in them or whatever. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing when we dig down deep with the Christian schools. It ties back to this Cognia, and I keep harping on Cognia because they're really, they are pushing a lot of this accreditation, a lot of these changes in the private schools as well. I'm personally experiencing it. I homeschool for my children. I'm just enrolling one in private school this year, and they're pretty much the only choice in the area, and they're accredited by Cognia. And I'm seeing the push toward what Cognia wants them to do to keep, jumping through the hoops to keep the accreditation. And I think that's really sad. And I noticed, I pulled up the PACE bill. I think this most recent is 3422. And I was looking at some of the other members in good standing at the different places that you've got listed in here. And I haven't had a chance to look at all of them on the call, but I did look through this smaller one. It's called the National Association of Private Schools. They actually have 3 schools listed in South Carolina, and I don't believe any of them exist. None of them have one of them has a website, but if you go to their Facebook page, the last activity was in 2016. They've got 16 likes. So it appears that none of these are even active schools in South Carolina under this one listed on here. So I'm just wondering, is this the appearance of choice without actually having the choice? Because it all roads lead to Cognia and the federal government. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns. And I know that's an entirely different conversation, because I am for choice. And if it were purely private money going toward people being able to go to private schools that weren't influenced by the federal government, go for it.
Yeah, and this is Jeff again. I don't know exactly what you're reading or seeing. S285 is the most recent, incarnation of the bill would pass the Senate. But I can assure you there's answers to your concerns. And I'm a big opponent of Cognia. I'm an opponent of the National Christian Association that's really turning a lot of our private Christian schools into nothing more than woke, indoctrination. And I'm the biggest opponent for us on our side to start our own membership organization. If we start our own membership organization, and we can add accreditation, leave accreditation out, but make it a conservative organization, we could start it here in the state of South Carolina. And guess what? We can get that organization added to the bill. And as long as these schools, the issue is school has to be a member of something. So these independent nonprofits are giving money to something that is recognized as a school. They have to be a member of something. There's no desire, and even the legislators is at least from what they've said publicly or even privately, to require these schools to be accredited. But they have to be a member of something. And I've been begging people to set up an organization here in the state of South Carolina that will compete with SCISA and SCACS and obviously Cognia, because those two organizations work with either Cognia or the National Christian Association. But there are solutions to it, and as opposed to just saying all school choice is bad. I can assure you, school choice has changed lives like you would not believe. I know parents, I know kids, I know school leaders. I know people that want to start schools, people that want to send their kids to private schools that can't do it, or want to homeschool, can't do it. And it's just, we have lived it, and this is why we're in the fight and the things that we have been doing. And I think if you hear our side of it, that's why a lot of people don't want to hear us. And that's why Adam Morgan won't talk to us, because, Adam Morgan wants to push the 100% government-run school choice. And I know you guys are, at least with Palmetto State Watch, are close to these guys. And everybody thinks the Freedom Caucus is great until you start seeing that they pushed the expansion of First Steps and put library employees on all those First Step reading, gave them more money, and talked about data sharing. And that was pushed by Stuart Jones. And I think it's a big reason he lost his congressional race, because we didn't have too much work to do to point that out to people. And, but we have to talk about it and find a solution for it. And, school choice can change lives. And I've seen it, and I can give you 1,000 examples. And I think when you hear it, that's why they try to silence our voice. When you hear it, you'll be like, oh my God, that's what we got to do. So that's what, when people do hear what we say, and it's not like I'm a super orator and kind of can change your mind and Svengali you, but I mean, hear what's going on and see what's going on the ground. Because I will tell you, we got the support of donors, we got the support of schools, and we got the support of parents. The only people we don't have the support of are the legislators who are pushing government-run solutions. And that's the biggest problem. I think we can all agree we do not want the government involved in anything more than they have to, military service or whatnot, protecting our borders, which they don't do, and certainly not in our schools. So I hope we can all get together and chat about that and come up with a unified solution. This next school. Yes,
Jeff, why is it that you've consistently talked crap, and even just 5 seconds ago, against the group of people in the legislature who have been opposing growing government and basically spiting guys like Stuart Jones? Like Ron Paul endorsed Stuart Jones. Like, how much more do you want as far as, like,
who is this? Is this Jordan? Is this Jordan Pace?
A freedom fighter worthy kind of guy. Yeah, I heard you were not
Okay.
being very kind or
Jordan, you're
fair
rubber
to
banding a little bit.
who are not very.
Jordan, you're rubber banding a little bit. I don't know if your Wi-Fi is bad.
Yeah, and Jordan, if you'll look at the article we posted about the First Steps bill, that should explain it all. The Freedom Caucus, Stuart Jones led the expansion.
I can hear you.
There
go
we
ahead,
go.
Jordan. I'm sorry, Jeff. We'll let Jordan finish up, and then we'll let you talk. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So the president.
Did we lose him again?
So the position of the Freedom Caucus is we want all the above school choice. And we said this in the beginning. My personal preference is for a tax credit bill. I frankly like the PACE bill pretty good. It's got a good name, and it's got a good function. And I'll take ESAs. I think they can all run concurrently. Whatever gets the most kids out of government viable concerns.
Jordan, you're rubber banding again. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
the string. No, I don't know what that means. What do you mean rubber banding?
it means you keep going in and out. Like, we can hear parts of what you're saying, and then your voice goes out.
All right. How about now?
I don't know if it's your internet connection, or maybe you're like in a room that doesn't have good
better?
Wi-Fi or something. Yeah, that's better.
Hello? All right. How about now?
Can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay.
Perfect.
My internet hates me. So the position, I'll just start. The Freedom Caucus position is we want all of the above school choice. ESAs are probably the lowest on the list, but tax credits, whether it be through the PACE program, which I like the name of that one especially, or my personal preference in the bill that I wrote was to copy Oklahoma's system, where it's a refundable tax credit. Like, anything that gets kids out of government schools is a win. And I definitely understand, because I taught in private schools. My wife taught in private schools. The dangers of the woke creep in those organizations, that the accrediting organizations, seen it firsthand. This, I think, is a matter of we're in a lifeboat and the lifeboat is sinking. So once we plug all the holes, then we can argue about like what tools we want to use to row the boat. This is kind of the way I look at it. Definitely want the best thing possible, But at this point, I think we need to get everything we can get. Is kind of the position I've taken, and I think it's the position we've all taken. The problem is we get this intercanine conflict of if we don't get the exact thing that one person wants, who has frankly a history of personal connection to a specific thing, so much so that I've literally had other legislators make it, not Freedom Caucus people, but kind of the mainline Republicans, uses their excuse that this one person's involved, so we're not going to do anything with it. I'm not saying that's right on their part. That's dumb. That's stupid. But it's giving them an excuse to not do anything because of the personalities that are involved. So my hope is going forward with anything to do with school choice or anything on this subject, we can get the personalities out of it and quit calling names and just try to get the best policy we can forward and keep rowing the boat so we don't sink. Hopefully that's not too analogy laden to make sense.
Jordan, this is Kasey. One thing that you had said is you're trying to get as many kids out of the government-run public schools as possible. Why aren't you addressing getting the government out of our schools so we don't have to have our kids run out of our public school system? I mean, we are supporting these public schools with public tax dollars, and legislators, and I don't know your voting record, so I'm not saying you directly, but you keep codifying federal government programs into our schools. I mean, the last legislative cycle, you've codified competency-based education, which actually is tied to a much, much larger agenda. Read to Succeed was another one in which you changed vocabulary to HIT instead of evidence-based. I don't remember if it's scientific-based now. Those are all key phrases that are necessary because of federal things that are coming down the pipeline. I understand the need to pull our kids out. My kids were in public school until 2020, and I'm sacrificing to keep them out of the public school system. Never in a million years was going to put them in the South Carolina public school system because I understood how the federal government was taking them over. But the only reason the federal government is able to be taking over our state sovereignty of educational choices is because legislators keep codifying the federal programs into our education law. So instead of advocating for us to have more tax dollars go to fund another system, which still doesn't solve the problem because it's still tied to the accreditors who are pushing the agenda into the schools. I mean, there's so much to talk. I would definitely love an opportunity to speak to you on the side. But, school choice, I mean, it's coming from the lobbyists. I mean, Ed Choice is working for the federal government. I can probably name several other national lobbyists. I mean, it seems that the legislator is actually working for the best interest of the lobbyist instead of the best interest of we the people, because you keep allowing the lobbyists to push the narrative. I mean, this is not a personal thing against you, so because I don't know you from a hole in the wall. But from the perspective of a taxpaying concerned citizen who's worked in the system and see exactly what's happened to me twice, happening for a third time. And the legislator is just going along. And I mean, the reason we're in this mess is because you keep legislating laws that put the mess even further into our system. So, to address the needs
I vote no a lot. I vote no probably more than anybody up there, which is one of the reasons why most of the legislators don't like me a whole lot on a policy level. And they tried really, really hard to recruit somebody to run against me, like all the other Freedom Caucus members. But yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Columbia's dysfunction primarily is that most legislators listen to lobbyists over their constituents. I mean, that's why Adams' rant against the scalp vote went viral and got millions and millions of hits because that's exactly the problem. The way to fix that, honestly, is replace the legislators. I mean, at the end of the day, it's either get them to stop growing government. And here's where we might differ a little bit and this is where I'm trying to maybe not differ, but I just don't quite understand the language you're using. When you say get the government out of government schools, I don't say that that's possible. They're government-run schools. That's
Well,
like
no,
trying to,
it's different. It's different. It's state run, and then there's federal programming. So the
yeah,
state should be
this,
codifying a preschool program, except for the state took a grant from the federal government to design this program using the
the
federal
first step stuff.
government's money, right? And now we've just codified what the federal government shaped in our school system. That doesn't maintain the sovereignty of South Carolina's educational system when you take the bribe from the government and then instill and codify their law, their programming.
I'm a product of South Carolina government schools. I can tell you it wasn't the federal government that screwed it up. It's been screwed up long before the federal government, before No Child Left Behind, Read to Succeed. All that's bad. We're in agreement there. Like, all of that's bad. And 100% agree that the state needs to stop taking so much federal money. It's entangling. It is strangling us. We've initiated I wouldn't call it an audit, but audit's probably the best word for it, within the Department of Education to get a hard read on how much the state spends to stay compliant with federal regulations versus the amount of federal money that we get for those strings, like that produce those strings. Because our rough estimate from our rough calculations was that we're not getting, like, it's costing us just as much to comply with them as we're getting from the feds. So once we get those hard numbers, something produced, that'll give us another stick to use.
But would you then get rid of the programs that came in through the federal government? I mean, if you're going to eliminate their dependency, then we need to eliminate the programs that the federal government got put into Title 59.
100%. I think we can get rid of Title 59, like
that,
by and large.
You know how you do that? Just get rid of the compulsory education laws. That's it. It's very simple fix.
So here, it's not simple.
No, I understand that, but that's at the end of the day, that's how you do it.
Yeah, in the state constitution requires that the state provide an education free to the end user, and we have a lot of problems with our state constitution, that being one of them. But it's very difficult to change. It takes 2/3 vote in both houses, and then a public referendum, and that would be a difficult thing to pull off. So it is simple, but not easy. But yeah, no, I think we agree on a whole lot there. So yeah, I mean that going forward, keeping the pressure up on both ends. That's I guess my biggest takeaway from this whole discussion. And Michelle and I have talked a lot as well. I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. I think we can push to get rid of all this Title 59 stuff, get rid of all this federal stuff, and try to get as many kids out of the sinking, off the Titanic as possible. Whether through PACE, ESAs, tax credits, all the above.
Did you know that those programs you're saying were actually the federal government's design? I mean, that's the problem. The school choice endeavor is actually created and developed by the federal government. You can find countless numbers of articles off the ed.gov site to show that this endeavor has been promoted, researched, experimented with through federal tax dollars. So we're saying we don't want to codify federal programming tools, and they shouldn't be in our state law, but yet school choice is just going to codify another federal program into our state law. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to say we don't want the Fed, but yet we're codifying what the Fed has designed. That's what school choice is. I mean, all of these endeavors, they came out of their research databases. This whole movement is from them. So I'm just saying that as a general, because I'm hearing you say they shouldn't be there, but yet you're advocating to put more federally designed programming tools into our state law.
Well,
So
I
think
assume that's true. No, go ahead, man.
No, this is Michelle. Hey, Jordan, how are you?
Hey.
So a thing that we seem to keep saying is we need school. We already have school choice. I don't understand that. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. I mean, parents can choose to homeschool, send their kids to private school, charter school, or public school. We have
I
school.
think we may have lost Jordan. I don't know if Jordan's still there.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still there? Okay, awesome. All right, so let's try and wrap it up. Maybe right at 10. If
Well,
I know Michelle, I think you
Elaine, if I could
had a
respond,
hand
because I
up.
think Jordan got on and was challenging me on some of the statements I was making. And Jordan, I'll just let you know, I mean, I've reached out privately to you guys with the Freedom Caucus. I asked privately about the first steps. You know, I mean, and just so you know, I mean, just, you know, I know you may like the Oklahoma tax credit, direct tax credit program for school choice as a solution, but you're at the same time, you'll be handing the program to our South Carolina Department of Revenue to administer. You'll be opening up everybody that participates in that program to more government overreach from the South Carolina Department of Revenue. I mean, you know, you're without, I mean, PACE, it's not like I'm saying I only want one or the other. But I mean, you know, and we agreed on the Senate side when they passed the ESA in the first time, they were going to pass PACE as well. And they were both going to be allowed to compete with each other. But as you know, what do we have today? We have only the ESA. We have only 100% government-run school choice program. And, you know, that's the problem. Y'all don't realize that you're getting manipulated that way, or you know, Adam Morgans of the world were part of it, and we're okay with it and just having the ESAs because that's what they wanted. But I mean, I don't think there's a single person on this call that would support your expansion of the Education Scholarship Trust Fund program, which you voted for 5164, you know, this last session. Nobody wants that. We do not want to expand. And the only thing that I know in school choice that provides a mechanism that will work forever to keep and push back against government overreach that has worked for 35 years across this country, you know, are the tax credit scholarships that are run by independent nonprofits. That's why this has become such a litmus test, because it is so clear and so transparent that this is the only solution, in that every other solution to private school choice, if you will, is more government, you know, interaction. And you're wanting and promoting, you know, with the Oklahoma program, more government involvement, and you voted for an expansion of the ESA program, which is more government overreach. So, I mean, I'm asking the Freedom Caucus, and this is why I've tried to have those private conversations. I've asked them to say, support this, and they won't. They are pushing for more government, you know, in the clearest example is what y'all push with the first steps.
Hang on, Jordan. I'm going to step in real quick. We're going to talk for about 10 more minutes. I just kind of want to put a period on the end of this sentence. So 10 more minutes. So we'll go ahead and continue talking. Go ahead, Jordan.
Just very quick. I would dispute the statement that the Freedom Caucus doesn't support the PACE bill. I'm a co-sponsor on it. All of us are co-sponsors on it. We're all pushing it. And we're going to continue to push it. Like, we're all the above. So I understand what you're saying. I disagree, but I do want to say very clearly that that's not true. And going forward, we'll continue to push for the PACE bill because we want all the above.
But you can't push for the PACE bill. Say you're pushing for the PACE bill and then voting for the government-run solutions and advocating for more government-run solutions with a refundable tax credit from the Department of Revenue.
Sure, we can. You don't like it, but we can. We just disagree there, and that's okay.
Well, you know, you and I've had the discussion about, you know, you're the one that put up the PACE bill as an amendment, and then, you know, I've never seen anybody take down their own amendment. That was you. So Jordan, this is critical to what's going on, and this is why we're having this whole battle. And until the Freedom Caucus and people say they want more limited government, actually sit there and start living limited government, then, you know, we'll continue to have the debate.
Well, I'll keep that in mind next time I bring 72 amendments to the budget and try to get $70,000 spent against me by the establishment. But I appreciate that, and I'll take that into consideration. Happy to continue talking.
But if you could also, can you share with us why the Freedom Caucus put forth that first steps bill? And
sure, yeah, I could take Stuart Jones, who brought it. Stuart's been very involved locally in the first steps. And look, if we didn't have first steps to begin with, I wouldn't put it into place. But it's here. Stuart's experience in Greenwood was the executive director of the Greenwood. Former executive director of the program in Greenwood was leasing space in a building that he owned to the program that he was running. So basically he was, it was corruption, just blatant corruption. And there was nobody who could step in and stop it because he had control of the board locally and the state had no direct oversight. So the way that Stuart explained this, what we set up was a state oversight board of the First Steps program. It doesn't grow the program. It just says this program already exists. We have the statewide board to oversee to make sure there's not going to be self-serving instances like they had, it wasn't Greenwood, it was Lawrence. That's where Stuart's from, Lawrence County, where they were doing that. Which to me says we shouldn't have this program to begin with, but we don't have the votes to get rid of it. So we should at least not have corruption run rampant. So that was the explanation of why that First Steps bill passed.
Yeah, and I just put the graphic into the chat or onto the post here on Twitter or X. Y'all also increased the overhead fees 62.5%. Every one of these First Steps organizations in every county is liberally run by liberals. I mean, and you found somebody, and it was in Greenwood. They were technically Stewart's called it, they embezzled $200,000, and you gave them more money. Y'all also added public library employees to every one of the pre-K learning programs in at least 46 counties. Why would we, in an age where library employees and all this battle we're having with libraries, you're adding library employees to all these organizations for oversight, and y'all also added data sharing for all the pre-K children. That's a real problem, Jordan, and that's the three things.
Well, Jeff, here's the part you're not telling people. Most of these programs are run in churches around the state, so that it's a private program with this government oversight on the local level, and now with some state oversight to make sure there's not that embezzling. But most of these programs, and I know that because in my commercial real estate capacity, I've helped churches get their buildings ready to be, safety compliant to take these kids in, because that's the vast overall majority of where these programs take place is inside of church buildings. So we're literally getting.
You're correct about that, but I'm talking about the boards that provide oversight in every county. You gave them more administrative fees. You added a library employee to every one of those boards. And then you required all of these churches you're talking about to do data sharing with the government.
And I want to add in about the library, because the library, according to state law, says that the librarians are only considered professionals if they've gotten their accreditation from the American Library Association, who is now run by a self-proclaimed Marxist.
Yeah, and we need to fix that. No, I'm 100% on board. We need to fix that. We need to get rid of that. I don't like licensing. Go check the first bill I ever filed.
And
like professional licensing is bad.
And did you say it was a private program? It's a private program, but isn't it being funded by our budget?
Yes. Right. So
how is it private?
On-the-ground providers of this. So the actual on the ground providers of the service. So the people running the 3 programs. The vast majority of them are in local churches all around the state, predominantly in poor, underserved areas. They get the funding through First Steps to provide, to pay their workers, and oftentimes provide food, often to kids. And the money from First Steps doesn't even cover the whole cost. It just helps offset the costs for these churches that do this stuff.
So are the employees who work for them?
So far that I've seen, the employees that work at the churches work for the churches or for the daycare.
But who's paying their salaries?
It's a combination of grants to the First Step program and then parents that pay tuition.
So let me just point out here, everybody on this call, let me just point out, everybody on this call is worried about government overreach and overstepping over all of our private schools if we expand private school choice, whether it's government run or independent non-run. What you're explaining, Jordan, as the chairman of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, is justifying the overreach that First Steps and every one of the government program statewide and every one of the First Steps boards and every one of the 46 counties to overstep and overreach into every one of those Christian, pre-K learning programs. You are actually talking about what everybody on this call is worried about and is why they're all opposed.
No. I'm not. That is untrue.
You just
here's what's actually happening, Jeff. I didn't vote to put this program into place. This program has pre-existed us. It pre-existed everybody in the Freedom Caucus who's ever been elected.
Came in 2014.
Maybe
You voted for the overreach in 2023. You voted
correct,
to expand it and overreach control over all of these Christians.
Okay, okay. So I'm going to try to finish my statement without being interrupted, if I can. We voted for this oversight. It's not perfect. We said it wasn't perfect. But what's the inverse if we didn't vote for it? We weren't going to get the amendments passed. We brought them up. They didn't pass. We, in committee, we tried to get this stuff done. Stewart got the best thing we could get to try to stop the embezzlement that had provably happened in his backyard. So is the First Steps thing good? It's not good for government to get involved in that. Are we using it so far to do some good in church, in these areas that these churches serve? Yeah, they're using this as a good thing because I've, like I said, dealt with at least the ones in the Charleston area. There's no curriculum requirements from these oversight boards so far. If we hear about them, we'll fight them. I'm fine if these didn't exist. I wouldn't have voted to put them into place to begin with. But so far, you're fear mongering about this is, they're going to get into these churches and change the churches. None of these churches rely on this for their budget. The ones that do it, it's a supplement so they can serve more kids that they wouldn't normally get to serve. It's not ideal. And to compare that to private schools, because you're having a disassociative statement there, where on one hand you're saying it's the accrediting organizations that are making the private schools go woke, but it's also the government funding that's making them go woke. Except in Oklahoma and so far in South Carolina, there's no curriculum requirements at all on any of those things, with ESSER or tax credit. It doesn't exist. So is it accrediting? Yes. I've seen that firsthand in the school that I taught in, that my wife taught in, that there was some weird stuff coming from SACS and through SCISA. That's very much a concern. It's not coming from the government. Could it? It certainly could. And these schools shouldn't rely on government funding for it. I agree. A lot of our Christian universities rely far too much on government Pell Grants and student loans, far too much. 70+% of the budget of most small Christian schools, which I went to one, so I knew this firsthand too, come from federal money. So when those exemptions to Title IX go away one day, they're going to have to make hard choices, and most of them won't make it. So philosophically, I agree with you, except on the ground, you're wrong about everything you've said. It's not happening that way, at least not yet. But it could, and that's a justifiable concern and danger. What we know is happening right now is at Cane Bay High School in my district, in a conservative-run school board in Berkeley County, there's teachers with gay pride flags on their walls, running gay pride clubs, and they have horrible trans books in their schools, in their library, that we are just now getting rid of in a conservative county. That's happening right here. We know that's happening. So if I can get as many of those kids out of there as I can, while also trying to fight that and get that out of the schools too, yeah, I'm going to do that, whether it's ESAs or tax credits or the PACE program, like your bill. I'll fight for your bill, even though you're telling lies about us, because that's what matters. It's the policy that matters, not the personality.
Just get back to me.
Okay, guys, real quick,
Jordan, because I've explained to these people exactly what y'all did with First Steps and how y'all increased the government overreach over these First Steps programs, and you're telling me it didn't happen.
Hey guys, I'm going to interject real quick. I said we had 10 more minutes. It's only because we have some people that need to step out. And I want to be respectful of our guests, and I appreciate everybody that's in here. I'm going to let Kasey, she's had her hand up, and we'll let her wrap it up. And then Alania, I know you have some closing words.
I think
ahead,
Michelle
Kasey.
should wrap it up, but I do want to just mention, because Jordan, you mentioned SCACs and the stuff coming out of them. It would be interesting for you to actually research the people who you work with side by side, day to day, and see how they are connected to SCACS. SCACS is a subdivision of the American Association of Christian Schools, and there are legislators who work for educational consulting firms that are the legislative law arm of the American Association of Christian Schools. So for me, I feel that perhaps maybe some of the input that's coming into you from people you trust is a little tainted because of their vested interest, which was brought up before. And
Sure.
First Steps has switched their focus now that they've got fully codified for the 3 to 5 year old range. If you look at the county boards, they're now focusing on the 0 to 2 year olds. They're going for the early head start. And that is the federal government, and it's tied to a grant that the state took from the federal government about their longitudinal database collection. So all of these things, you know, with that data collection, that's also the school choice bills. That's going to tie these kids into that. These state tests aren't just testing for academic standards anymore. They're testing for their social and political views and their moral values. And we do know we're heading towards a social credit score, and all we're doing is opening up the door and allowing all this data to be collected to be used against the kids. And Kai, you had mentioned something earlier before about social justice. Same department of the federal government is now offering grants to tech firms to create virtual games for students to learn how to become critical thinkers, to start talking about misinformation and what's the difference between misinformation and it's their social duty to do all this stuff. So, you know, they really are going to make our kids, you know, they're going to make them informants on one another. These leadership programs are actually identifying the kids who will be the leaders and who's going to be the follower, and they're making bets on them. These kids are a commodity, and the school choice, no matter what school choice it is, it will come down to the accreditation, and it's the accreditors who are still controlled by the federal government. So that includes
Please
GACs.
send all that to me. I'm happy to read it. Happy to
I'd
read
love
it
to sit down and show you quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that.
Michelle.
Well, thank you all.
Can you let Michelle have the last 5 minutes? Michelle, can you go on your point that you were talking about before?
Oh, well, I'll do it real quick because it's getting late. I was saying before that we already have school choice in this state. And, you know, that's what I wanted to reinforce. I think we keep ignoring that. I mean, we have school choice. We have to seriously stop looking for government to fix government issues. The fact that we're all debating, which I think is wonderful, by the way, because we need to have these discussions. I think they're so important. But the fact that we're debating about what was codified and what was not codified is the issue. These laws have grown so large that nobody even knows what's in it. Nobody even knows what's going on, who's going to get regulated. And again, you can protect it all you want this year, but you won't be able to protect it once you build that framework. It'll continue to grow and grow and grow. So with that, that's really all I had to say, is that we really need to start pushing the fact that we do have school choice. And we need to encourage parents to take on that responsibility and not providing handouts that really creates dependency. And when you create dependency, you take away responsibility. And it's important to have responsibility. There's a lot of value in that. So that's all I have to say. Go ahead, Elena.
Thank you. Go ahead, Elena.
Thank y'all so much for joining the conversation. I wish we had more time for it, but unfortunately I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. And since we've got such a good, lively discussion, we will be rescheduling or having the same discussion next Sunday at 8:00, and we'll put that out there. And I'm so glad that we got to kind of cover everything. The point of this whole talk in this space was to have really a round table of multiple viewpoints in order to get everybody's thoughts on everything. And I think we succeeded. So thank you all for joining. I really hope to see everyone back here. If anyone wasn't able to add to speak or wanted to add more, please definitely come on next week, and we'd love to hear from you. But thank you all so much for having all of your points in a respectful manner, and that's what we continue to hope to do next week. And as always, we as Palmetto State Watch encourage you to do your research and always, kind of look into the facts of everything. And so that's why we're here, to have an open discussion on multiple different viewpoints. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.